All right. Good morning, everybody. Glad you guys are joining us. Hey, week 3 SEC conference play. I'm Perry White. We're going to jump into it. My man, Zach McKinnell, is going to join me here in just a second, man. I hope everybody had a good weekend. I hope everybody had an opportunity to stay safe with some of the severe weather that went across the South. It affected some of the series this weekend with some games being pushed back, some double headers being played, but nonetheless, it's a great weekend. Some teams separated themselves. Some teams we found out if they're legit, and some teams continue to ride the struggle bus, as we call it. And so we're going to break down everything that happened across the SEC in week 3. Going to take a look at even back at some of those Tuesday midweek games. Some of the SEC teams did over the weekend. Just kind of break it down and move forward and look ahead at midweek games coming up this week, as well as some big series coming around the SEC. So I'm waiting on my man Zach to join us here in just a second. And once he jumps on, we're going to be ready to go. So hope everybody's staying safe this morning. Some more severe weather going across the South as we've had it all weekend. And so, prayers out to anybody that was affected by the weather and that is affected this morning. Let's see. Get my man Blue on. We're ready to rock. Zach, what's up, man?
What's up, man? How we feeling?
Doing good, man. How you feeling?
Good, man. If I cut out here, man, it's this weather. Yesterday, our power was out for like 2, 3 hours yesterday, man. It was wild down here.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. As we start the show, just, everybody dealing with the effects of the severe weather. It came through Baton Rouge here where I'm at this morning and over the weekend and still pushing through. So off and on all weekend across the South, people have been dealing with severe weather. So hope everybody's staying safe out there and remain vigilant when it comes to keeping up with the weather. Man, SEC play, man, you ready to jump into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's jump back into it. I'm Perry White, my man, Zach McKinnell. Let's jump right into. Let's go back to some of those midweek games, some games that I had to circle and pay attention to because, as always, you and I, we talk about coming into the week. Some of these games against teams that you may not see as a threat, but you never know what you're going to get from a team doing those midweek games, especially in the SEC coming out of those big-time weekend series. And let's start with Florida versus Florida State, right? Florida is a team that we've seen been struggling in SEC play, taking on number 4 Florida State on Tuesday. Florida State ends that game and comes out with a 21-3 record overall. They're 5-1 in ACC play. And Florida State gets the victory 8-4 over Florida. Florida continues to struggle. They had 3 hits in this game with 1 error for Florida State, and the Seminoles 8 hits, 1 error. Florida State gets the victory 8-4. Florida just couldn't seem to get it together. Last time these two teams played, Florida was able to get the win, Blue.
Yeah, not super surprised here. I think we both picked Florida State here. Florida State's, I would say, one of the better teams, probably even nationally, right? And I just, man, something's just not right with Florida, man. I can't put my finger on it, but I mean, we're gonna get to the weekend series here in a minute, but I mean, you got to put them up there as probably one of the bigger disappointments in, I mean, college baseball. I just don't think many people saw this Florida team being this bad.
Yeah, then we move on looking past Florida and Florida State with the victory. We look at Xavier versus Kentucky. Xavier gets the victory in this 9-3 over Kentucky. Big innings in the 4th and the 5th inning for Xavier. 2 runs in the 4th, another 3 to add in the 5th, and 1 more in the 6th before tacking on 3 more in the 9th. 8 hits in this one, 0 errors for Xavier. And on the other side for the Wildcats of Kentucky, 7 hits, 1 error. 9-3 the final score. Xavier gets the victory over Kentucky. He was 15-8, 2-4 after that ball game.
Man, a disappointing one for Kentucky, but bounce back in the weekend series, right? And so I just think it's another example of some of these teams have sleptwalked through these midweek games, and I think that could be another example of one.
Yet a tough loss for Kentucky in that midweek game. Then we look at one that really caught me by surprise. Missouri State over Arkansas. Missouri State gets the victory 14-13. Football score in this one. Missouri State in this one, 14 hits, 0 errors. On the other side for the Razorbacks, 16 hits, 2 errors. 5 runs in the fourth, another 3 to add in the fifth, and 4 more in the sixth for the Razorbacks. But a big ninth inning for Missouri State to put up 5 runs. And then this one went into extra inning, the game winning when 1 run in the 10th inning. Missouri State knocks off the Razorbacks.
Yeah, this one, I'll be honest, I don't know if anyone saw this coming. I think it just shows too that it's unpredictable as other sports can be. Man, in baseball, man, if the bats are, if you're not connecting with the bats, your pitching staff just has a bad night, man. You could just anybody can be beaten, and I think that's what you saw in this midweek game with Arkansas and Missouri State.
Yeah, pretty tough game right there for the Razorbacks. And then this was one I kept my eyes on because we were talking about the Missouri Tigers and the struggles they've had in SEC play. They go out of conference and take on Illinois out of the Big Ten. Missouri gets the victory 11-9, 12 hits in this one for the Tigers, 0 errors, 10 hits for Illinois in this one with 1 error. Missouri gets it done 11-9. Much needed victory for the Missouri Tigers over an opponent with a name.
Yeah, massive win for Missouri, man. I like I said, I think it's going to be a long season in the SEC, and so hey, man, you got to get them wins in the midweek game.
You got to get them anytime and any way you can get them. And then the other one, number 11, Auburn takes on South Alabama. South Alabama gets the victory in this one, 13-5. Were you shocked at the upset with South Alabama?
No, not in particular. I think South Alabama is that team, right? That where I believe we talked about on the last episode, Perry, where they just seem to get hot in the right moments, and I'm not super surprised here, at all.
But South Alabama gets the victory 13-5 over Auburn. And then we look at North Alabama taking on the Alabama Crimson Tide. North Alabama with an upset in the midweek game. 4-3, 5 hits for the Jaguars, 0 errors on the other side for the Crimson Tide, 6 hits, 1 error in this one. Went back and forth, 2 runs in the 4th inning for North Alabama, another 2 in the 6th for Crimson Tide. And the winning run in the 9th inning, the bottom of the 9th for North Alabama seals the deal 4-3 as they upset the Crimson Tide of Alabama.
Yeah, another one I didn't see coming, especially because the way that Alabama looked in the weekend series too, right? Where I mean they looked at well no my bad no Alabama won this game 4-3.
4-3, excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean a very close one, but yeah, I think Bama is a team here. We have what 3 teams kind of on that fringe
Yeah.
of can they work their way into the elite? Man, I think Bama's kind of put themselves at the top of that list after a solid week.
And excuse me for that. Were you impressed with looking at the way South Alabama was able to compete in this game with Alabama, who we seen last week against Oklahoma did pretty good?
Yeah, a little bit surprised. I just think it's so tough, right? Because I don't want to say midweek games are meaningless, but it just seems like these teams get a little bit more locked in on the weekend, and so I think sometimes that those midweek games it just you can let them slip away, man, or let a team hang around longer than you maybe would in a juiced up environment. I think that's why you see some of these SEC teams, Perry, when they see some of these teams in the regionals, super regionals, etc. There's a different story at that point of the season.
It is, and let's jump right into the weekend series, starting with the Thursday series. Number 15, Ole Miss taking on Florida. Florida's a team who had struggled coming into this one with no wins in SEC play. Ole Miss comes out on top 7-5 in this one. 8 hits, 0 errors for the Rebels on the other side for the Gators. 10 hits, 0 error. 7-5 in that Thursday game. And then you go to game 2, Ole Miss and Florida. Ole Miss holds on to get it won by 1 run, 10-9 in this one. Went back and forth. Ole Miss able to put up 3 runs in the 9th inning, 11 hits in this one for the Rebels, and 0 errors, 9 hits for the Gators, 1 error in game 2 as Ole Miss goes up 2-0. And then to close it out, Florida gets that third game, 11-8. 13 hits in this one for the Gators, 0 errors, 14 hits for the Rebels, 1 error. Florida able to put up 5 runs in the 9th inning. They lose the series, but they pick up their first win in SEC play in game 3 of this series with Ole Miss. Ole Miss now 21-6 on the season, 6-3 in conference play. The Gators of Florida now 19-11, picking up their first win in conference play. Blue, they're 1-8, and you just talked about them in terms of that midweek game against Florida State. The struggles that we continue to see from the Gators.
Yeah, this Florida team is just isn't good. I just don't know if there's just if there's a nice way to put it there. I just don't think I just something's not right with them. But I will say, Ole Miss back to back SEC series wins. They're kind of working themselves into potentially that top 10 arena. It's shockingly, I thought I would have them right outside the top 10 period. They jumped to number 9 this week in the top 25. I still think that's a little bit too high for where I would have them probably nationally. But right now, man, they're cruising. Two straight series wins, and they get the big win over Memphis in the midweek game. So, hey, man, Ole Miss continues to roll. I don't know if this team has that extra gear to compete with some of the elite teams at the top of the SEC just yet.
And we'll continue to find out as we get through SEC play. We move on to another game that started out Thursday. LSU taking on Mississippi State. LSU gets game one, 8-6 over the Bulldogs. 8 hits in this one, 0 errors for the Tigers on the other side for the Bulldogs. 8 hits, 1 error. LSU able to hold on. And then you look at game two. Both games 2 and 3 were postponed and pushed back due to weather, inclement weather coming through the Baton Rouge area. LSU on a tight one, 2-1 in game two, gets it done over Mississippi State. Both teams with 7 hits and 0 errors in this one. And LSU went up 2-0. And then to close out the series, this game was pushed back late on Saturday night. The Tigers of LSU get it done 17-8 over the Bulldogs. 19 hits in this ball game for the Tigers, 1 error, and on the other side for the Bulldogs, 8 hits and 2 errors. LSU pretty much opened it up, and they started the game off with 8 runs in the first inning before the Bulldogs of Mississippi State answered back with 4 more runs of their own in the second inning. But just too much hitting power for LSU in this one as they was able to close it out and win the series and get all 3 wins to sweep the Mississippi State Bulldogs.
That's not a surprise. I don't think LSU's lineup has the most power, Perry, where they're just going to sit out there and crush home runs all day. I think that's Georgia, but I think in terms of consistency, man, when LSU's bats get hot, they just get hot, man. And it can get out of hand for a team very quickly. And this was the series that I think both of us picked to sweep on just because, LSU, slipped up a little bit last week. I think they were motivated. When this LSU team locks in, man, they're as good as any other team in this league. And I think this weekend that they really flex their muscle with the bats this weekend.
You're right. You talking about Georgia. This is our first top 25 matchup we're going to cover over the weekend. Number 11, Auburn on the road at number 3, Georgia. And I'll talk a little bit more about Georgia because last week I said, you know what, I'm still on the fence with them. But in game 1 against the Tigers, the Bulldogs of Georgia get it done. Georgia 4-1 over Auburn in this one. 6-6, 0 errors for the Bulldogs on the other side for the Tigers of Auburn. 4 hits and 0 errors. Then we go to game 2. Georgia continues its way of flexing its power. 11-7 in this one over Auburn as they go up 2-0. 14 hits, 1 error for Georgia. 8 hits, 1 error for the Tigers. Both these teams put up big runs in the 5th inning. In the 6th inning. As you look at Georgia with 6 runs in the 5th, another 4 in the 6th, and then you look at Auburn, 5 runs in the 6th inning with another one in the 7th. And then we go to game 3, and Georgia gets the victory, 9-6, sweeping all 3 games against Auburn. 9-6, 10 hits, both teams in this one. 1 error for Auburn, 0 errors for Georgia. The Bulldogs hang on in the top 25 matchup against Auburn and get all 3.
Man, I've been super impressed with Georgia, man, and I think Auburn on the flip side, I mentioned them. It was like them, Alabama, Oklahoma, as teams that were just kind of in that purgatory. Are they a contender or pretender? When I look at Auburn, man, I just don't know if they have the overall consistency in terms of their bats and also their pitching staff, right? To be a game in, game out contender. I think they can get hot and knock off some people, but also too, I just don't know if they have that. I don't know if they're there yet. And for Georgia, man, like it all starts with their hitting, right? They lead the SEC in home runs by double digits, if I'm not mistaken. And it's weird because their pitching staff actually ranks 13th in the SEC in ERA allowed, Perry. And they're allowing runs, but they're so explosive offensively that they're just hard to beat. So I do wonder if there's a team that can slow down the offense just a little bit, are they going to be able to keep up in terms of their pitching staff with some of the top teams in the SEC? And that's the next question for Georgia to answer. But as of right now, man, as we're recording on March 31st, Georgia looks like a legit contender right now in the SEC. Man, I've been super impressed. I mean, 28-2 is no joke, and this team's rolling.
28-2 and 8-1 in conference play. We move on to number one Tennessee going on the road to take on South Carolina and Paul Maneri. Tennessee gets it done in game one, 11-7. 10 hits in this one, 0 errors on the other side for the Gamecocks, 13 hits, 1 error. Tennessee takes game one. Then we go into game two. It was a tight one, but Tennessee able to get it done and win it by 2 runs, 7-5 over South Carolina. Tennessee Volunteers in this one, 8 hits, 0 errors. On the other side for South Carolina, they were able to get the hits, 11 hits, 0 errors, just not able to get those runs in. Tennessee goes up 2-0 in the series, and then they close it out and win all three on the road at South Carolina. 7-2 the final score in game three on Sunday. 12 hits, 1 error for the Volunteers, 10 hits, 0 errors for South Carolina. Tennessee moves on to 26-2, 8-1 in conference play ever since they dropped that game one to Alabama last week in that series. And South Carolina continues to struggle. They're 17-12 overall, but 1-8 in conference play on the first year Paul Maneri.
Ah, Harry, you questioned me last week picking against Paul Maneri, man. It's going to be a long season for them. Listen, he's a hell of a coach, right? But at the end of the day, man, this league is so deep. You're going to have some talent. I just don't know if it's there yet. Now, if he can recruit and this team can get better in years, yeah, years into the future, but right now, man, it's just not there. And I look at who they went up against, right? I don't really fault them. I don't think they're a bad team for losing to Tennessee because I think Tennessee right now, Perry, play has shown most consistent pitching staff in the SEC. They're the only SEC team under a sub 3 ERA. First in the SEC, they're 26-2, and I think they're rolling right now, man. You kind of look back at that ETSU game as like, man, when they're off, like yeah, they can be had, but man, when they're at their full potential, man, they're really really tough to beat.
Yeah, they are, man. And, looking at them, they're rocking running. And with Paul Maneri, I think what it's going to come down to, like you said, program building and being a part of that program building, he's going to have to do what many others do, put the money where their mouth is when it comes to recruiting. And I think that's going to be the next step for South Carolina as Paul Maneri just in year one. Moving on to year 2 and 3 under him, we're going to see how big can South Carolina go out and recruit some of those ball players to keep up with some of these elite teams around the conference.
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest thing, right? Because I mean, it's hard to quantify, right? Because rosters change so much year to year, but you kind of wonder how far behind they are. Like, is it a 1 year thing, Perry? Or I mean, because look at the top of this conference, man. You're talking the elite of the elite teams, teams that can realistically go on and win the national title. I don't know if this is just a 1 year thing for South Carolina. Like, if you really want to compete in this conference and make runs deep into the World Series, I think it might be even a 2 3 year rebuild. I wonder how much patience the South Carolina administration is going to have with him to build this roster out.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the future holds. Paul Maneri winning championships at LSU, now going over to South Carolina. Who knows about winning championships themselves on baseball? Can he get that program back up and running to the point of being able to compete? They had that opportunity against one of the best teams, not only in the conference in the nation, against Tennessee. So now moving forward, what do they look like next? Let's look at Kentucky and Texas A&M. Texas A&M, a team that we talked about that continues to struggle. Kentucky just, whatever in the SEC. Texas A&M gets the victory in their first victory in SEC play against Kentucky in game one, 9-7. 10 hits in this one for the Aggies, 4 errors. And on the other side for the Wildcats, 11 hits and 2 errors in game one as the Aggies get that victory. Then we go over to game two. Kentucky finds the way to get this one. 14-11 final score, 13 runs, 0 errors for Kentucky, 11 hits and 0 errors for Texas A&M, and now we have a tie series 1-1, and then we go into game three, and Kentucky closes this things out 10-5 10 hits, 0 errors for the Wildcats, 6 hits, 1 error in this one. And a little controversy with coaches yelling back and forth in this one in game 3 due to a curfew rule. But Kentucky gets the series over preseason select #1, Texas A&M. Texas A&M now 13-14 on the season, 1-8 in conference play, and Kentucky moves on 17-9 overall, 4-5 in conference play as they win the series 2-1 over Texas A&M.
And it's just the bats for A&M are just terrible, Perry. I mean, as a team, they're batting just 2.6 right now, and they got the lowest on base percentage in the SEC, if I'm not mistaken. Their slugging percentage, I believe, is second to last. It's just bad right now. Like they just don't have the offense to keep them in games, and it puts so much pressure on your pitching staff to 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 limit the other team. And I just think in a conference where you have so many explosive playmakers all across the conference on all these different teams, it's just really tough when you're not consistently able to generate any offense to win in this league. And you're seeing it cost them game after game after game. And so it's going to be a long year for A&M, man. But they came into the season ranked #1 in the nation, Perry. And we're sitting here talking about, I mean, if it weren't for Missouri, they would easily probably be the worst team in the SEC, and they fall below 500 on the year, which is just an unbelievable fall from grace for this Aggies team.
It is, and I think you can see the frustration listening to Texas A&M head baseball coach in the post-game interviews. You can just hear the frustration of, the struggles that this team has had, and they continue to struggle as they lose the series to Kentucky. Then we move on to Texas on the road, taking on Missouri. Missouri coming off that midweek victory over Illinois. And then here comes Texas, one of the top teams in the country, 15-4 in game 1, 11 hits, 0 errors for the Longhorns, and for the Missouri Tigers, 6 hits, 1 error. Texas takes game 1. We go to game 2, 7-4. A little bit closer battle for Missouri in this one, 10 hits and 2 errors for the Longhorns, 11 hits, 3 errors, and that 4 runs for Missouri. Texas takes game 2. They go up 2-0. Then we come down to game 3, and Texas cleans house 3-0 in the series as they win 7-1 over Missouri. 7 hits, 0 errors for the Longhorns, and on the bottom for Missouri, 2 hits and 2 errors. Missouri continues to struggle in SEC play, and Texas moves on, winning this series in convincing fashion.
I don't know what you want me to say about this series. Missouri's bad, Texas is really good, and I'm not surprised at all. Missouri just doesn't have the talent right now to compete at this level. And I mean, I think their struggles through out of conference play really highlights. I mean, what we see. I mean, Perry, right now, 7.87 ERA for their pitching staff right now. It is it is just not good. That their pitching staff is arguably one of the worst in I think any of the P4 conferences. And then on top of that, too, the lowest fielding percentage in the league too, and they rank bottom 3 in hitting. There's just not a lot of positives to take away from this team right now, and I think you're going to see a lot of 3-0 sweeps throughout conference play.
Yeah, I had an opportunity. I reached out to Coach Jackson, Carrick Jackson, over the Missouri Tigers head baseball coach, and that was what he talked about, what you just pointed out. Struggles on the mound, and that's something that they're going to have to fix if they want to continue to not get swept here in this conference when we look at these series coming up. Here's another top 25 matchup that we had outside of that Auburn and Georgia matchup. Here's Oklahoma on the road at Alabama. Alabama hosting 2 back-to-back big series up in Tuscaloosa, and they get the victory in game 1, 8-6 over the Sooners. In this one, the Crimson Tide with 12 hits, 2 errors. On the other side for the Sooners, 10 hits, 1 error. Crimson Tide gets game 1. Then we go to game 2, 6-5. Oklahoma sneaks out one with 2 hits, with 2 runs in the 9th inning to close this thing out. They had 9 hits, 1 error for the Sooners, and for the Crimson Tide, 8 hits, 1 error. Now we have a tie series, 1-1, and it comes down to game 3, and Alabama Crimson Tide found a way to close it out, 8-6 over the Oklahoma Sooners. 9 hits, 0 errors for Alabama in this one, 8 hits, 2 errors for Oklahoma. The Crimson Tide wins the series 2-1. They go on now to improve 25-4 overall on the season. That's 6-3 in conference playing for the Sooners. 25-5 on the season, 5-4 in conference play, Blue.
Really, really impressive series win for Alabama. I think it was probably the most impressive weekend performance, right, given the competition. Either probably them or Georgia, but Very, very impressed with Alabama, man, to keep rolling. And I think they've kind of worked their way in. I think we have that top tier right there. We were trying to figure out what tier two looked like. I think you can make an argument, man, that Alabama's right there at the top of tier two. And man, if they can continue to, I would say progress, right? Because I still think there's some room before they reach their ceiling this year. But I've been super, super impressed, man. I really, really like the kid, Justin LeBron for Alabama, man. I think his bat is live, and then also Cade Snell as well. I believe he ranks third in the SEC in batting average too. A super super consistent hitter, and it's good to have guys throughout your hitting lineup, throughout your offensive lineup that can get on base and also too make some plays for you, man. Put points on the board because at the end of the day, man, in the SEC, if you're not scoring, you're getting blown out because this league is full of firepower. So I think Alabama has exceeded all
Yeah, you talking
expectations.
about Justin LeBron, he went 3 of 5 in game one RBI and 1 home run. Yeah, you're talking about his bat. It is on fire. Let's go to another top 25 matchup. Arkansas on the road in Nashville, Tennessee, taking on Vanderbilt in the Commodores. Arkansas gets it done big in game one, 9-0. Shake back from that midweek game and that loss against Missouri State. They handled business against Vanderbilt. 9 hits, 0 errors in this one, and a tough day swinging the bat for Vanderbilt. 3 hits in this one, 0 errors. Arkansas gets game one. Then we go to game two, a little bit better for Vanderbilt. Arkansas gets this one 6-4 over Vanderbilt. This one goes into extra innings. Arkansas able to get 3 runs in the top of the 10th. Vanderbilt only 1 in the bottom of the 10th. 6-4 final score, 9 hits, 1 error for the Razorbacks, 9 hit, 1 error for Vanderbilt. Arkansas goes up 2-0. Then we go into game three. And Arkansas closed this thing out like they supposed to do. They flexed their muscles. They won it 7-3 with 9 hits, 0 errors on the other side. For the Commodores, 8 hits, 0 errors. Arkansas putting up 5 runs in the eighth inning to seal the deal in this one, man. And they won't go on to win this series 3-0 over Vanderbilt in the top 25 matchup.
Very, very, very impressive win here. I still, I maybe it's just me, right? I still don't know what to make of Vandy, and maybe the brand is like bringing me in, and I should have less expectations, right, Perry? But it's like every single time they show a little bit of promise, they regress back to kind of like the meme in the SEC, right? I think they're going to be that team that hangs around that middle point around that eighth, what really sixth to probably ninth or tenth place in the SEC, and that's just where this team is. I just don't think this is a Vanderbilt team that is as good as what we've seen historically. But the same flip on the flip side here, Perry, I was trying to hype up a little bit of what Arkansas is doing, talking about them being national title contenders. Man, like at the end of the day, man, I really do think this team has the potential there, and it's time for this team to deliver in the postseason. And I think you're seeing week in and week out that they're showing the consistency. They have the talent offensively, their pitching staff's deep, and they're dealing right now. If they could just get this thing into the College World Series, man, this team can compete with anybody, and it might be time to have to deliver a national title to Fayetteville.
Hey, you talking about might be time. It is time, Blue. Listen, the Razorback fans have seen this each and every year where the Razorbacks field a team that everybody feels can go out and compete and not only compete, win a national championship at the College World Series, but it's when the game matters most is where they come up short, whether it's in a regional, super regional, or the College World Series itself. I think that's where the frustration for Arkansas fans have come for Coach Van Horn. And with this team that you see this year, we've seen it in the previous years where they've gone on one series of one game, and then when it mattered, it was like, okay, here's the disappointment. We knew it was coming. We just didn't know when it was coming. So this year, I think Razorback fans want to see, can the Razorbacks push it all the way? Because I think it's long overdue, especially when you see the success of other teams in the conference that have gone on to win the College World Series. You have to ask yourself, question mark, how has Arkansas not been able to do it when we've seen plenty other teams in this conference go on to do it each and every year?
Fair question, because it's not going to be a talent issue this year. So you're going to have to deliver. I think. I think the pressure's on to 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 compete for that title, man. It's going to be tough, right? Because you're probably going not only going to have to navigate the toughest conference in college baseball, you're probably going to have to see multiple of these teams again in the College World Series as well, if not an SEC team in the national title. So it's going to be tough, man. But Arkansas got the talent to be there and compete at that level.
Let me ask you this: for you, most impressive series win over the weekend?
Oh God. I'll go Alabama for right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a close one over Georgia. I think Alabama getting that win over Oklahoma was massive, and I think I'll go with that one just because it kind of solidified themselves at the top of that tier two, and also too for I think Oklahoma's a really good team, right? I mean, still a top 20, top 15, top 10-ish team in the nation, man, and Alabama getting that win was huge for a program that entered the year with not these type of expectations.
Most disappointing series loss over the weekend?
Vandy. I'll go Vandy. I just think after last week's series win that we kind of talked about them potentially, overreacting to that Auburn loss in that first series where they just collapsed and let that one slip away. And it just looks like this team doesn't have the consistency or the ability to play at that elite level that we've gotten to accustomed to seeing from Vanderbilt baseball.
Yeah, I didn't think Arkansas was going to get all three. I got to say, I was a little surprised by that, especially coming off that midweek loss to Missouri State. I started to be a little fickle about it, but the Razorbacks were able to get it done. I have to agree with you there. And as long with Alabama, giving Tennessee that one only loss in conference play, winning game one last week in that series, and fell short in game 2 and 3. But then coming back this week against the Oklahoma team and really stood fast and held on to get that series victory. Really impressed with where Alabama stands right now. Looking at Missouri, they're 0-7 in conference play. But let's take a look at Florida and Texas A&M because those are two teams I want to talk about and get your opinion on. Both those teams are 1-8 in conference play. Texas A&M had high regards coming into the season. Of course, they were preseason number one. And then even looking at Florida, they were a top 25 program. But now looking at where Florida and Texas A&M, you couldn't have told me this 2 months ago that when these teams got into SEC play, that they would be 1-8 both at the same time in conference play, and that Texas A&M will be one game under 500 this far in the season.
Yeah, just a misevaluation of talent, right? And it's just been poor execution. It's been everything for them, right? They're just not a very good team, and it all starts with the bats, like I talked about earlier. They have really struggled hitting the baseball, and sometimes this happens, right? You're just in a slump, and Perry, it's hard. It is just hard to consistently compete week in and week out, and they just don't have anybody who can generate any juice offensively because I think their pitching staff is okay, right? Probably middle of the pack SEC-ish, but man, they are just bad in terms of hitting. And also, too, their fielding hasn't been the great either. They're second to last in fielding percentage as well, which those mistakes will cost you when your offense isn't playing well. And so I just think A&M from the jump has really, really struggled. And I think at this point of the season, you kind of are what you are. And it was just a gross misevaluation by the preseason voters, man, to put this team number one.
Are you a little surprised even with Mississippi State sitting there 1-8 in conference play as well amongst those teams? Would you have expected more from the Bulldogs?
Uh, A little bit, but I don't think this Mississippi State team is the caliber of some of the, better ones we've seen over the past few years. I would expect them to rank middle of the packish, right? It's just a brand, kind of like how we are with Vandy, but it is a little surprising that they've struggled as much as they have. But even going back to our first episode, man, I just think in out of conference play, you kind of saw the flaws start to, seep from the cracks of this team, and I just don't. I think in SEC play, if you have any weakness, anybody any given weekend can expose that, right? Especially those
Man, I lost him for a second. I know he's dealing with some weather coming over in his area. Let's also look at the SEC standings for the weekend coming out of those series. And you look at Missouri Tigers, they're at the bottom of the SEC right now, still win this 0-7 in conference play. And then you look at four teams right there, all matched up with each other at 1-8 in conference play. That's Texas A&M, that's South Carolina, that's Mississippi State, and that's Florida. And you heard from Zach and I talking about The question mark right now over Florida and Texas A&M. Did not see those teams being in the position that they're in, but nonetheless, it has been tough for those teams. Moving up then, once you come out of those teams, then Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Auburn, all three of those teams sitting there at 4-5 in conference play. Vanderbilt coming off that weekend series loss against Arkansas. Auburn was a team that we thought could be right there competing that we've seen early on, but they're 4-5. And then you move up right above them, Oklahoma, who took on Alabama that we talked about. Oklahoma now 5-4 in conference play. Then you got Alabama and Ole Miss both sitting there at 6-3 in conference play. LSU 72 in conference play since those two losses that they had in that series against Texas. And then you look at the top three teams right now: Arkansas, Georgia, and Tennessee, all 8-1 in conference play. Blue, I got you back.
Yep, you got me.
Looking at the SEC standings, man, going from the bottom, we know Missouri's at the bottom, has not won a game in conference play. But then you're looking at the three teams at the top: Georgia, Arkansas, and Tennessee. But then let's just look at the middle of the pack, because we know those three teams, right? We're going to see things weed itself out from them. But then you got Texas, you got LSU right there. You got Alabama, and you got Ole Miss. Out of those three teams, LSU, Alabama, and Ole Miss, who do you think could be the biggest surprise out of those teams? And I'm putting LSU in a surprise just because they fell short in that series with Texas. And LSU is still, to me, part of the upper echelon of the conference. But I got to put them right there because Alabama is impressive. Alabama seems like one of those teams that they can beat anybody on any given weekend. And then you got Ole Miss just kind of staggering along where they showing, hey, we got some fight in us as well.
Ah, that's tough because if you give me LSU, that's a cheat code. Because to me, I would still put LSU in that upper echelon because I think tier one would be somewhere like Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, LSU
Mm-hmm.
would be the tier one. Now, obviously, right now, LSU would be at the bottom of that just because of how they performed on the field. But I think in terms of potential, they probably are at the top of that if they can put it all together. But just taking like out LSU out of it, I think it's Alabama to me is still the biggest surprise, Perry. That was a team that some people didn't even have top 25 that were questioning, if Alabama had the players to really push for, I mean, even to be in the conversation with these other teams is kind of shocking. Now, the problem with Alabama is, they got the big win over Oklahoma, right? And I'll give them that, but they they haven't played anyone from that tier one, and that's what I'm waiting on, right, Perry? I want to see because it's great, man. A massive win over Oklahoma, and the Tennessee series, they get one of them right, but they ended up losing those last two games, and they sweep A&M, who hasn't been very good. You look ahead, you got the series with Auburn this upcoming weekend, which is going to be huge, and it's on the road, right, in Jordan-Hare. And then you got State, and they really won't play a tier one team period till the middle of April when they go to Baton Rouge and LSU.
Yeah,
That'll
you're
be the
right.
next one. And then on top of that, after that one, Perry, you look how their schedule lays out. They get Missouri at home. You should have a good chance to sweep there. You get Vandy on the road, who hasn't been the Vandy that you've seen. Then you get a Georgia, who's in that tier one, right? But then, Perry, you end off the year at Florida, who has not delivered expectations. They avoid a lot of these top teams in the SEC. So you're looking at them. You have a really good shot if you can just steal one of those Georgia LSU
Mm-hmm.
series and you sweep the teams you're supposed to sweep. This team could be in a really, really good position to even host like a super regional.
They could be. And then looking at those elite teams that you're talking about, the tier one: Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee, and then factor in Texas. Uh, Most impressive team thus far for you.
Ah, God. I mean, I still think the best team's Tennessee,
Yeah.
but the most impressive thus far has been Georgia.
And I told
Just especially,
I said it last week. I was not sold. I kind of think they, in my mind, up until last week, that they stumbled themselves, kind of lucked up to be in this position. But they are showing that, hey, we deserve to be here at 28-2 overall and 8-1 in conference play to be in the conversation right there with Arkansas, Tennessee, and Texas.
yeah, the interesting thing with Georgia, like I mentioned earlier, is they're hitting the ball so well right now, and they're so hot with the bats. If that if there's a dip, is their pitching staff good enough to pull them through some of these games where their bats aren't carrying them to and we haven't really seen that. We haven't seen them struggle at all. And so in terms of hitting the ball, and so that's my concern is I just don't know if they're that's going to be my concern way, way in the future. Right? And we'll talk about this in future episodes. Is like once they get to the Super Regional College World Series level, they're probably going to have one of the worst pitching staffs out of those teams that make it there. And I just don't know if their pitching staff is good enough to carry them. But right now, as of March 31st, they, to me, have been one of the most impressive teams in this conference.
Let's look at some midweek games coming up, Blue. And on Tuesday, we got Queens on the road taking on Georgia and that one. Should I ask you who you got?
No, I think we know who we're taking in that one.
Let's slow our roll, though. Look, we're quick to hand out W's to some of these SEC teams, but yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'll take Georgia in that one. Tennessee Tech on the road. Tennessee Tech 19-10 overall on the season, 4-2 in their conference play, taking on Tennessee up in Knoxville. What you think about this one? A battle of some Tennessee squads.
Hey, Tennessee has sleptwalked through some midweek games. This could be one that could get interesting. I think Tennessee Tech is probably just as talented as ETSU, so it'll be one I'm watching. But I'm gonna give Tennessee the win here.
UNF taking on Florida. Florida needs a victory. Do they get it in this one in Gainesville?
Yeah, I think they get this one.
Western Kentucky on the road taking on Vanderbilt on Tuesday night. Western Kentucky, Blue, 25-3 overall on the season, 4-2 in their conference, taking on Vanderbilt 20-8, 4-5. Is this one of those ones we should circle with an upset alert?
Yeah, I actually think so. I think this is a game that could be a little bit surprising that an SEC team drops, and so I'm actually going to go with the upset here.
Another game, Texas A&M taking on Incarnate Word. Texas A&M with the struggles. College Station. This should be one Texas A&M gets a victory.
You would hope so. Yeah, they lose to Incarnate Word, it's going to be a really long season.
Then we got Samford on the road taking on Alabama. Samford 14-14 on the season, 1-2 in their conference play. What you think about the Tide taking on Samford?
I like the Crimson Tide here. I think they keep that momentum from this past series win.
Here we go. The Razorbacks taking it, leaving from the confines of Fayetteville, going down to the capital city area in Arkansas, going to be at North Little Rock, taking on SWAC opponent Grambling. Grambling taking on the Razorbacks. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, I like Arkansas here.
Take Arkansas. Then we got UAB traveling to Auburn to take on the Auburn Tigers. UAB 16-12 overall, 2-4 in conference play, taking on the Auburn Tigers. What you got?
Yeah, this one's another trap game, man. I don't like the way Auburn's trending right now. I'll lean Auburn in a close one, but I think UAB makes it interesting.
Here's an interesting matchup. UAPB, the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, the Golden Lions, 5-23 on the season, 3-6 in conference play, taking on Missouri, who's 9-17 overall, 0-9. Missouri has played some teams out of the SWAC as they went over down to Vero Beach, Florida a couple weeks ago. Well, let's say about a month ago, taking on some teams down in the Andre Dawson Invitational. Coach Kerrick Jackson, who is the coach at Missouri, knows this UAPB team well, as when he coached at Southern, this was one of the teams in the division that he had to coach against. Missouri, is this a much-needed win, a midweek game again? As they got Illinois last week in the victory, this one against UAPB, can they get it?
Yeah, they got to win this one. Give me Missouri. I think the midweek is where they're going to have to build their resume out because I just don't know if there's going to be many wins on the weekend.
Presbyterian on the road taking on South Carolina. The Gamecocks 17-12 overall, 1-8 Presbyterian, 14-5 overall, 6-3 in conference play. Paul Maneri in this one versus Presbyterian.
Upset alert again here, man. I think
Ooh.
Presbyterian can make it very interesting, but I'm gonna lean South Carolina here. I think they get on the right side.
Here's a matchup I'm interested in. Mississippi State going on the road, taking on Memphis. Mississippi State 16-12, 1-8 in conference play. Memphis 11-16 overall. They're 0-6 in conference play. Two teams struggling in their conference, but here's a midweek game where somebody got to win.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, God, it's tough. I'm gonna go Mississippi State in a close one.
Yeah. I think I'll rock with you on that one. Here's another Texas matchup. Texas State, who's 12-15 overall, 4-5 in their conference, taking on Texas, the Longhorns. It's tough to beat the Longhorns in Austin, who's 23-3 overall, 8-1. What you got there?
Yeah, give me Texas over Texas State.
Oklahoma and Texas Tech. I like this matchup. Old school conference foes coming out of the Big 12. Oklahoma now in the SEC. Not forgetting about Texas Tech. What you think in this one?
This is another one I can see upset alert here. I'm gonna go with the upset. I'm gonna go Texas Tech.
Louisiana Tech on the road coming down to Baton Rouge on Tuesday night. Louisiana Tech 16-11 overall, 3-2 in conference play, taking on the Tigers, who are 26-3 and 7-2 in conference play. What you think in this one? The Tigers taking on Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, the Tigers roll in this one.
Then we'll close it out on Tuesday. Jackson State 16-10 coming out of the SWAC overall. They're 6-5 in conference play, taking on Ole Miss 21-6, 6-3 in conference play. Blue,
Yeah, give me the Rebels here.
you going Rebels all day?
Yep.
Two SWAC matchups versus the SEC. Of course, we got Arkansas and Grambling, and then Jackson State and Ole Miss. And then let's look at some Thursday series that's going to pop off this week. Ole Miss and Kentucky. Ole Miss and has to go on the road to Kentucky up in Lexington. And then we're going to have LSU in Oklahoma. LSU going on the road to Norman, Oklahoma to take on the Sooners. Who you got? Let's go in this series starting Thursday. And we'll just look at the series overall. But those two games to be on Thursday. Who you got in the series against Ole Miss and Kentucky and the series against LSU in Oklahoma?
Oh man, I like LSU to take the series. I think 2-1 on the road. I think they're going to drop at least one of those. Um, but then in terms of Ole Miss Kentucky, man, God, this is just this is a tough one to pick. I'm gonna go Ole Miss 2-1 over Kentucky on the road in Lexington.
Interesting one right here. And I'm gonna roll Ole Miss with you, and I'm gonna take LSU. I think LSU get all three, and I'm gonna go Ole Miss with you. I think it's 2-1 with Ole Miss in that series. Here's an interesting one. Vanderbilt has to shake back from going 0-3 against Arkansas last week in that series, and then coming up with Florida, who needs a much-needed series victory over somebody, and they get it over in Gainesville this weekend, starting on Friday. Who you like out of this Vanderbilt and Florida series?
I think the struggles continue. I like Vandy 2-1 in this series, but I do think Florida gets them a game at home, and it's a game that's probably much needed. I know it's not a series win, but any game is a win right now for Florida.
I went with, you know what? I'm going to go the opposite. I think Florida has to get it done at home. I'm going to take Florida 2-1 against Vanderbilt at home. They need it. At some point, you got to say enough is enough. And I think this has to be the weekend for Florida Gators and their fans to say enough is enough. At home, can we get it done? I'm going to go Florida. I think I'm going out on the limb. I'm not ready to quite bury the Gators yet, but it's about time to start lowering the coffin, I think, here soon. Texas A&M going on the road, taking on Tennessee. Texas A&M struggling. Tennessee, the opposite. They're winning. What do you like in this series, and who do you think get this one between Texas A&M and Tennessee?
Tennessee 3-0.
Yeah, I think so.
It's
And this
good.
is a travesty by the time, if that does happen, really what happened to Texas A&M, honestly.
Yeah, it's gonna be ugly, man. You get the Tennessee bats and this offensive explosiveness versus that pitching staff. God, it's gonna be bad. And then A&M can't score. To beat Tennessee in Knoxville, man, you're gonna have to put up some points, and I don't trust A&M to do that.
Yeah, I'm rolling Tennessee all three games. I think they get it done. Oh, man, Alabama. This should be a good series, Blue Man. You might want to go check this out. Alabama Crimson Tide on the road. We're having to go over to Auburn, taking on the Tigers, man. This should have all the fireworks that you want in SEC rivalry play in a series between these two teams.
Yeah, very interesting one, right? Auburn, I thought they were competitive against Georgia. They lost on a walk-off, I think, on Sunday. A big win last weekend for Alabama. I look at this as almost a must win for Auburn, right? Because if they drop this one, especially if they get swept, they kind of fall into that bottom tier. The long drop all the way down there. So I'm gonna go here. It's tough to win on the road in the SEC. I'm gonna go Auburn 2-1 over Alabama.
Ooh, I think I'm gonna go the opposite. I'm gonna go Alabama 2-1. Uh, you tried to hype me up here when we was going through the standings, telling me about what Alabama has in front of them, and if they can win the series that they have to, that they need to, that they could be in a position. This is one of those positions I think they can show on the road against Auburn. I think Alabama gets it. I'm gonna go Alabama 2-1 in this series, Blue. Palminteri, South Carolina, going on the road, taking on Mississippi State up in Starkville, Mississippi. This is flip a coin on this one. Who you
Yeah.
got in this one? South Carolina and Mississippi State.
Hey, when you got to flip a coin, I'm going with the home team. Give me Mississippi State 2-1.
I go Mississippi State as well, 2-1 in that one. I have to agree with you on this one. Big matchup right here. Georgia going on the road, taking on Texas, the Longhorns and the Bulldogs over in Austin, Texas. Man, this should be a one. And look, now we've been asking, is Georgia legit? They went on the road. They got it done against Florida. Is Georgia legit? Having to go on the road and take on Texas. This is going to be their first true test, in my opinion, in SEC play. What you think about this one with Georgia and Texas?
Winning on the road is tough, man, and Texas is tough to beat in Austin. LSU found that out earlier this year. I'm
Yep.
gonna go 2-1 Texas. I do think Georgia gets them a game, but I just think Texas is too much at home.
How surprised would you be if Georgia was able to go on the road and steal a series against the Longhorns?
I won't be surprised at all. I think that's how well they're playing right now, especially with how hot their bats are.
Mm-hmm.
They could come out and blitz Texas, and I would not be surprised. That's the one concern though, is that I think on the road in the SEC it's tough to keep that consistency up, and I could see in certain moments that the bats aren't as hot as they were in Athens this past weekend against Auburn.
As we circle this game, I guess we can say this will be the game of the week. Would you agree?
Yeah, 1,000%.
What would you like to see out of Georgia in this game on the road against Texas that could get them that series victory?
More consistency from the pitching staff. I want to see that pitching staff really show its depth and show that on all 3 days they have the ability to compete against the elite of the elite, and that's been the biggest thing because I think they've proven everything they can with the bats. Right, we know they're one of the most explosive offenses in the SEC. I want to see how deep that pitching staff really is against the elite teams in the SEC, especially on the road too.
And looking at Texas, what is it that Texas does well that makes them one of the toughest teams in the country and not only in the SEC?
I mean, the complete team for one. I think they're kind of in the middle in terms of hitting, but man, it's that pitching staff too. Probably got the second or third best pitching staff in the SEC. In my opinion, I know they rank second in ERA. They've been really good there because pretty consistent in the field. But I think the pitching staff right now, Perry, is where you look and is kind of carrying this team. When you look at some of the top hitters, I mean, they got Mendoza in terms of guys who rank really, really high in terms of batting average. You also too, what was it, Galvin, really good slugger as well. On base percentage, they got some guys with Galvin up there. So I think it's a little bit of everything, man. But I think the pitching staff is where they really separate themselves.
Yeah, I'm curious with this one. I'm going to be watching this one. This is the game that I'm going to really be tuned into this week with Georgia and Texas. Georgia's first true test in the SEC play this year. And Texas has already shown they're able to do it, get it done at home as they got that series against LSU. And then to round it out, Missouri on the road at Arkansas. What do you think? Can Missouri Tigers go in there and surprise some people against Arkansas? Missouri State
No,
just did it last week. What about the Missouri
no,
Tigers?
no. Let me go ahead and get them Razorbacks 3-0.
Oh, man. Arkansas all three?
Yep.
Oh, that'd be big. That'd be big. All right. As we round that out, I think I'm with you too. Arkansas all three. Blue, you know it. Give us the top 25. What we looking at the top 25 as of today coming out of these weekend series before we look at some of these midweek games tomorrow?
Yeah, Georgia Tech at 25, Arizona State at 24, Vandy at 23, first SEC team in the top 25, K-State at 22, Coastal Carolina at 21, Troy hanging around, man, at number 20, North Carolina at 19, Louisville 18, DBU at 17, Auburn drops a bit to 16 after that series loss to Georgia, Oregon and UCLA at 14 and 15, Southern Miss, man, hanging tough at 13, nationally. UC Irvine at 12, hanging tough as well, top 15 team out of a mid-major. Oregon State at 11, and then man, here comes the SEC teams in the top 10. Perry, Oklahoma at 10, Ole Miss at 9, Bama at 8, LSU at 7, then Clemson slides in at 6. Back to the SEC at 5, Florida State at 4, and then of course you got Georgia, Arkansas, Tennessee at 1, 2, and 3.
Woo, that's a gauntlet, man. But listen, I'm looking at Southern Miss and I'm looking at Troy outside of the SEC because we continue to put our finger on teams to watch. Those two teams, as you see, are in the top 25. Those two teams that you got to keep your eye on as they get through conference play. Then we get on the back end and start looking at some of these regional games, man. Troy and Southern Miss got to watch out.
Yeah. Hey, man, Southern Miss has done it already, right? And so it's a team you got to look out for. I'm very curious to see how UC Irvine, Southern Miss, DBU, Troy competes when we get to the tournament time.
Yeah, Dallas Baptist is a team that has shown. I mean, they have the depth of whatever area that you need. They have really hit the scene hard, and they've shown that they are a power out there in baseball. Anybody right now in the top 25, aside from what the teams that we named, is kind of surprising to you right now, or is we would say a team to watch for?
Um, I'm very curious to see how like a Clemson and a Florida State will compete against the top of the SEC.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know that SEC fans are gonna, scream from the rooftop that the ACC isn't as deep as the SEC, and they're right. But I'm very, very curious to see how those teams would perform because as good as the SEC is, right, 8 of the top 10 teams, which is just outrageous, by the way, you have Florida State and Clemson in the top 6. You also have Louisville at 18, North Carolina at 19, Georgia Tech at 25. The ACC is no slouch here.
Yeah.
So I still think the conference is deep enough. It's going to be very interesting to see how strength of schedule and things like that play out down the stretch in the regional, super regionals, like we kind of saw in March Madness, right? Everyone kind of, was talking about SEC versus ACC. You have Duke in the Final Four playing their best basketball. And then you got Florida and Auburn in the Final Four as well, two SEC teams. You had half of the Elite Eight. They'll be very, very curious to see if maybe Clemson and Florida State can sneak up and maybe steal a title away from the SEC, where I think a lot of experts would kind of write in pen that an SEC team is going to take home the championship this year.
Yeah, it's just hard to go against them when you just named the top 10. And I thought it was all SEC. It was pretty much the SEC Invitational. Is what it sounded like to me. So, I mean, how could you go against it? But I guess at the same time, you have to be realistic. Teams can be beaten. We saw Tennessee go down. We saw Arkansas go down. We've seen Texas A&M fall off the cliff. We've seen Florida right behind them, leading right behind Texas A&M, driving off the cliff. Teams are beatable, and if you come out and don't play well on the right day, any given day, anybody can get it.
Yep. Any given day, man. And especially once you get once you get to the College World Series, stuff like that, everybody's elite, right?
Yeah.
And anything can happen. And all it takes, and we've seen this in baseball, we've seen this in football, seen this in basketball in different ways, right? Man, in baseball, if the bats get hot, pitching staff gets locked in at the right time, you can just go on a run, and you can beat teams that maybe you weren't as talented as. You're just playing better than. Same with March Madness, right? We've seen a team just get hot from the three, Perry, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, they're not as good at all five starting positions, but man, they're shooting their Perry, when you shoot 60% from the three, there ain't nothing you can do. I don't care who's on the other side, you're just balling. Same with baseball, man. If like Georgia right now, if they're as hot as they are with the bats right now, they're just gonna be tough to beat for anybody in the country.
Georgia will make me a believer this weekend if they can go on the road and get that series against Texas. I'm already still on the fence with them. I'm saying, all right, I'm starting to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit. If they go on the road and get this series victory over Texas, I'm getting a big cup of that Georgia Bulldog juice, and I'm going to drink it proudly right here on the show for everybody to see, because that'll be a huge series victory for me looking at them. Alabama, Oklahoma, I'm curious. Alabama and Auburn, I'm curious to see what happens in that series as well, because Auburn is still a team knocking at the door. Alabama is showing us, hey, don't count us out. Those two series for me, I'm watching. I want to see in a rivalry game, can Alabama get it done against Auburn? And can Auburn shock us and say, not so fast, Alabama? And then on the other side, once again, I'm looking at LSU having to go on the road to Oklahoma. That's going to be a tough one. But as you said before, LSU is almost like a cheat code when you look at the depth that they have. I mean, they can rotate guys from anywhere, any position. And you know what? They're just a tough out no matter any game, any day, any series that you played in.
Yeah, still like okay, so I think when if you're just judging off of on the field play, you have all these teams in the conversation, but if you're just judging based off potential, right? If everything clicks perfectly and everyone was playing at 100%, who are the best teams in the SEC? Man, it is really, 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 really tough not to look at LSU right now
Yeah.
and Tennessee. like those teams to me, it you're you're not always because you don't always get, everyone can't play 100% all the time. But man, when those teams are locked in, I just think they have a different gear than the rest of the league. And it's just going to come down to whether LSU can tap into that, right? Because we've seen them not live up to expectations in certain series and certain moments.
Mm-hmm.
If they can tap into it fully, man, that team's going to be really, really tough.
Big weekend for some SEC baseball. Our game of the week is going to be that Georgia on the road at Texas game. Another game, as we said, to look out for it will be LSU on the road at Oklahoma, and then circle Auburn and Alabama. It don't matter what the records are going to that one. You know it is a rivalry game. Blue, man, we wrap up another show this week, man, as we continue to move forward. We knocked out week 3 of SEC conference play. We talked about the series coming up in week 4, and as well as some of those midweek games, man. Let everybody know where they can find you and keep up with you.
Yeah, man. You can find me here on Mondays, man, talking SEC baseball, at Zach McKinnell on social media, FCS Football Central on SI, and the Blue Bloods on all podcast streaming platforms,
And
man.
of course, I'm Perry White, man, right here with On the Yard Network. You guys can catch me. I do a radio show in Baton Rouge on 107.3 FM called the Jaguar Journal every Saturday morning from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. You can follow that across all social networks on X, on Instagram, as well as Facebook, as well as you can subscribe to the Jaguar Journal YouTube channel. And just like we're here with On the Yard Network, On the Yard is across all social media, X, Instagram, right here on Facebook. And be sure to go subscribe to the On the Yard Network YouTube channel. Would love to have you guys do that and support me and my man Zach McKinnell. Each and every Monday, we're going to continue to bring you some of the scores and recaps around the weekend series from the SEC, and then look nationally around the top 25 and letting you know what's going on in the world of college baseball as we inch closer, right? We're going into April. May will be here before you know it. Then we'll be into regionals and super regionals, and then we'll be wrapping this thing up into the College World Series. So continue to follow us on this journey as we bring all the information, the stat lines, the wins and the losses in the conference series to you guys each and every weekend and each and every Monday when we do the show. So for myself, Perry White, my man Zach McKinnell, we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Be sure to tell a friend to tune in with us. And if you're not able to catch us live, you can watch us live here or playback on Facebook, or you can go watch this on YouTube if you want to share it on the Yard Network YouTube channel. So thank you guys, man. For myself, Perry White, and my man Zach McKinnell. Hope you guys have a good week. I hope your team wins. See you guys next